Honorable Grant McEwen, former Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, talking quite a bit about politics in Alberta, and I mentioned the fact that I would like to see William Aberhart honored. Ever after that, Grant would see me every few weeks, and he'd say, Art, when are you going to start the foundation? You do what you're talking about there, Art, and things will work out. It's a pleasure to be here honoring a famous Albertan. Our project in particular is to keep for perpetuity a great Albertan. We're going to do it either by book or film or video or any way that we can muster, but working with people, young people in particular, who will be given scholarships for writing about Mr. Aberhart or even debating about Mr. Aberhart. One of the ideas is to keep his name alive because, in our opinion, as a board, he's a man who served for 37 years, his government served for 37 years that he had started. But basically the main thing we're honoring him is a man who had great sympathy for the poor and down out. And he was around in years when people were pretty desperate here in Western Canada. People were losing their farms and losing their hope and almost giving up ever getting out of it. And he said, no, we've got a way and we can do it if we work together. And he was very successful at it.
He says to one, you're a babe. He says to another one, you're a strong man. I want to talk to you. Henceforth, I have not spoken to you as strong men, but as babes. Did you ever see that in the Bible? You thought he meant that to you, strong men? No, he was talking to the babes. A lot of baby Christians in the world. They need to have nurses every day. God knows all about it. But we need a strong man today. Men with the Spirit of Christ in them and determined to take the responsibility of the Father upon them and go through with it no matter where it lands. That's what's needed today. We're developing in this province some of the strongest men in the world, Christian men. Men who are not afraid to declare their allegiance to the Christ of Calvary. They'll carry it through no matter what happens. They're ready to assume their responsibility.
I was quite young, of course, when I first met Mr. Aberhart, and it had just dawned on my understanding the realism of genuine Christianity as a result of listening to Mr. Aberhart on the radio. So naturally, my early conversations with Mr. Aberhart and early associations with him primarily were in the field of spiritual matters. He had tremendous knowledge of Scripture. In my opinion, he was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Bible teachers that this country has ever produced. And certainly the thing that had the most profound effect on me in my early associations with him was his amazing knowledge of the Bible, the realism of Christian life to him as an individual, and his wonderful ability to impart in a clear analytical way the teachings of the Scriptures to others.
I am more concerned, Mr. Manning, about their confidence in the God of heaven than in me.
If I had never met Mr. Aberhart, my life would have been completely different.
In the year 1926, I had my 15th birthday. All right, go ahead and count now. One of my gifts was an autograph album. I had a high school principal whom I admired very, very much. His name was William Aberhart, or Aby, as we in the high school affectionately called him. I had known Mr. Aberhart, I think off and on, from afar, since I was about 10 years of age. He was acquainted with my mother before we got to know him through church work, because she was a teacher in the city of Calgary for many, many years. My mother and I happened to be among guests in the Aberhart home, as they were very hospitable people, on the night of my 15th birthday. It wasn't a celebration, needless to say, for my 15th birthday, but nevertheless it happened to come on that night, which was a very happy occasion for me. I had arrived at the Aberhart home on 13th Avenue West here in the city of Calgary, clutching my autograph album and wanting nothing more than to have Mr. Eberhart, the first one to write in that album. Always fond of young people and children, he took the book readily into his library, and in a few minutes he came out, and on the very first page he had written his message to a young girl on her 15th birthday. And this is what he wrote. The longer I live, the more deeply am I convinced that that which makes the difference between one man and another, between the weak and the powerful, the great and the insignificant, is energy, invincible determination, a purpose once formed, and then death or victory. Who was this man who wrote this challenging message to a young person starting out in life?
I thought he was a born teacher. He had a gift, a special gift for teaching. He was particularly interested in young people as such, and he seemed able to determine just what a young person's talents were and their possibilities were, and he identified with them in trying to encourage the development of those strengths that they already had.
I would like to say this as part of my tribute to Mr. Eberhart, of whom I'm sure we're thinking more tonight than any other person connected with this whole movement. I had the privilege of perhaps knowing him as well or better than any other person outside the members of his own family. I had the great privilege of living in his home with he and Mrs. Eberhart. That is something that I will cherish as long as I live. And if I have been able to contribute anything to the ongoing of this cause in the years that have passed since he was called away, I owe it primarily to the things I learned from him in those early days of that association. In 1924, when I was a lad of about 16 years on a farm in Saskatchewan, but didn't even know where Alberta was except on the map in a geography class, certainly with no thought of ever coming here. Tinkering around one Sunday afternoon with an old mail-order house radio with one of these gooseneck loudspeakers of those days, out of which the whoops and whistles came, and if you stuck your head into it far enough, you could hear the program. I heard the voice of this man of whom we're speaking coming from Calgary. He wasn't talking about social credit. He was talking not about man's relationship to his fellow man at that time, but about man's eternal relationship to his Creator. And I learned as I listened the realism of a man's personal relationship with his God. That is what brought me to Alberta, to Calgary, to the Bible Institute, to the association that has led to all of these other things. And in the confidence of what we've learned from those experiences of the past, and the strength of the solidarity of the people of Alberta, with the continued memory of the goal and the leadership and inspiration that our beloved founder gave to our movement and to those of us who knew him, surely we can go into the future with confidence and even with enthusiasm, knowing that there isn't anything impossible, as you heard earlier tonight, if you have the determination to keep on fighting until death or victory.
This afternoon it's my privilege to hear a tape recording with the voice of a man who meant more to me in my youth than any other, William Eberhart. Brought back some memories to me. He's in heaven now. Many a time I've seen him behind the pulpit with that great big fist of his, just sort of beating the time as we sang, I love him. And I've seen the tears trickle down his cheeks. He sang that from his heart, I love him. I love him because he first loved me and purchased my salvation on Calvary's tree. Oh, God, give us such a conviction. Let's pray.
It was Art Dixon's great desire that the old Westbourne Baptist Church be preserved as an Eberhart Manning Social Credit Museum to educate future generations as to this critical and fascinating time in Alberta history. Let's help Art's vision come true as we press ahead. The old historic Westbourne Baptist Church served as a launching pad for an Alberta vision. With the ongoing expansion of the Stampede grounds, the future of the historic Westbourne Baptist Church is uncertain. Those passing by the 436 13th Avenue Southeast site in the scant remains of Victoria Park may see only an old and perhaps outdated white brick building. The new Stampede Casino now surrounds it to the west, but a rediscovery of the profound history emanating from this 250-person chapel makes it an important link to the history of Alberta. The original Baptist congregation moved out in 1967, eventually to relocate to the new Westbourne Church in northwest Calgary. A miniature but distinct example of a Gothic revival style, the small mission congregation of modest means was in need of a preacher in the year of 1915. On December 15th of that year, just after the close of the Great War, the increasingly popular and able William Aberhart offered his services as a lay pastor for no remuneration. He would minister to them while continuing his day employment as a high school principal of the new Crescent Heights Collegiate Institute, all the while building a reputation as one of Western Canada's leading educators. The church grew and prospered under his teaching. Conversion and discipleship by Aberhart at the Westbourne Church formed critical leadership associates who would later be invaluable in the start of new ventures of his influence in the future. Muriel Preston Manning and Cyril Hutchinson, later the prophetic Berean Bible principal, were young people in the congregation at the time. Thursday evening prophecy classes taught by Aberhart attracted many from other churches and came to be known as the Calgary Prophetic Bible Conference. It quickly outgrew the 250-person capacity of Westbourne and eventually ended up in the Palace Theatre with 2,000 seats. It was at the Palace that the radio broadcast, encouraged by CFCN founder W. W. Grant, began in the fall of 1925. Aberhart's radio preaching grew to an eventual audience of more than 300,000 and provided the original sponsor a brick and rafter campaign to fund the building of the new Calgary Prophetic Bible Institute at 516 8th Avenue West in 1927. A historical window display still exists at the Holt Renfrew business on 8th Avenue where you can see it for yourself. The first student to sign up was the Rosetown, Saskatchewan farm boy Ernest C. Manning, who had come in February of 1927 to check out the Westbourne congregation and youth group and to talk with Aberhart about attending Bible school. To add in the many artifacts that are being gathered from this era is the introduction of this very limousine from Heritage Property Corporation, the restoration of William Aberhart's government limousine, a 1937 Buick McLaughlin. This would be on the grounds of the churchyard of the Westbourne Baptist. And there's something more. The fall 2009 edition of Heritage Highlights, put out by the Heritage Property Corporation, has this title, Waking a Slumbering Giant, William Aberhart's Limousine. Heritage Property Corporation is embarking on a very different kind of restoration project. Still focused on preserving Alberta's rich history, this project aims to get Premier William Aberhart's 1937 McLaughlin Buick back on the road. William Aberhart served as Premier of Alberta from 1935 to 1943, heading the controversial Social Credit Party. Beginning in the mid-1920s and throughout his political career, he was widely known as a radio evangelist, earning the nickname Bible Bill. Extensive rehabilitation efforts to return the custom limousine to its original splendor, Heritage Property Corporation is optimistic that a restoration of this magnitude is worth the effort to preserve such a unique and important piece of Alberta's political history. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at an age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. and Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem. North of Jerusalem today, about an hour's drive, one finds the two memorials of Jacob's well and the tomb of Joseph at the present-day town of Nablus. There the remains of the patriarch were carefully preserved when they were eventually buried in Canaan. They provided successive generations of Israelites with an important link to the past. Links with the past give meaning to the present and are just as vital for the history of the province of Alberta. On February 6, 1975, Kona Eberhart Cooper wrote to Eva Reid of the Calgary Albertan, asking whether or not it was time for her parents, William and Jessie Eberhart, to be reburied in Alberta. Eva Reid, as a young student at Eberhart's Prophetic Bible Institute, boarded in the home of William and Jessie and got to know Kona and Ola as friends. Eva reports just 5 days later in a February 11, 1975 article in the Albertan, an article entitled Eberhart May Come Home, and reports the following. Mrs. James Cooper, the eldest daughter of the province's first social credit premier, said in an interview from Half Moon Bay, BC, that she was definitely in favor of such a move. I have always regretted and felt very badly indeed to think that Dad was buried out here in Vancouver, as I felt that his home and his rightful burial place should have been Alberta. Her sister Ola added, certainly Dad's fields of endeavor were in Alberta, and I'm inclined to agree with my sister that he should rest here. Ola recalled her mother, who died in 1966 in Calgary, had regretted the decision she made in 1943 when Eberhart had died. At the time, she said both daughters were living in BC, and Mrs. Eberhart had every reason to believe she would be making her home there. In 1975, both daughters said they would like their parents to be buried in Calgary, as they were buried in bronze caskets and there would be no problem with exhumation. This link to the past is one that needs to be forged again. William Eberhart should be welcomed back to Alberta, complete with a long overdue welcome with state honors given by the Lieutenant Governor. It makes sense that the best location for the reburial would be at Eberhart's old Westbourne Baptist Church on the grounds of the Stampede Park, using the old Westbourne as a museum to the Eberhart Manning social credit era. Like John Diefenbaker, whose grave is located beside the Diefenbaker Canada Centre at the University of Saskatoon, in a place where the crucial historical link is in public view, so William Eberhart should once again be overlooking the fields of his lifelong endeavors. The reburial would include a procession from BC on the train, and then the placement of the Eberharts in an above-ground mausoleum on the grounds of the Westbourne Baptist Church, complete with state honors from the province of Alberta. Alberta owes William Eberhart no less an honor.